Void Miner, Children of the Belt, Part 5, Chapter 21, Advanced Training. The derelict station had a way of breathing. Arg heard it in the faint pulse of its old pumps, the distant thrum of circulating fans scavenged from scrap and coaxed into life by young, unsteady hands. He had spent weeks here now, long enough that the rhythm of the place, the patchwork survival, the jury-rig systems, the anxious chatter of the orphans, was as familiar to him as the hum of the Dust Widow's engines. But familiarity wasn't the same as security. He knew too well how thin the line was between functioning and failing, between life clinging on and life drifting out into the black. That was the line he had come to teach these children to walk, and every day he wondered if they truly understood how sharp it was. The younger ones still watched him with wide eyes, half awed, half wary. The older ones met his instructions with crossed arms and muttered questions, suspicion woven into every glance. Yet beneath all of it, Art could feel the shift, his patience, his persistence, and the long hours he had spent patching leaks with them, showing them how to rig air processors, how to weld without burning through fragile plating. These efforts had started to take root. But now came the hard part. They had to step beyond patchwork survival and into the world that sustained lives in the belt. Mining, salvage, the dangerous balance of drawing wealth from rock and ruin without losing themselves to it. He called them together in the station's central bay, a space that had once served as a cargo hold before war and abandonment turned it into a common ground for whoever was left. Light spilled in from strips of salvaged LEDs, uneven but serviceable. Crates doubled as benches, and a scarred table of bolted plate served as the makeshift center. Arg stood at the front, broad hands braced on the table. "You've learned how to keep the lights on," he began, voice carrying over the murmur of a half-dozen conversations. "You've learned how to breathe, how to eat, how to make the station hold together another day." He let the words settle before lifting his gaze to sweep the room. "That's survival. But survival isn't enough out here. Not if you want to last." Some of them shifted uncomfortably. Others, like Tessa, the wiry girl with sharp eyes who often spoke for the older ones, met his words with a guarded defiance. "What do you mean, not enough?" she asked, her tone carrying both challenge and curiosity. "I mean that sooner or later you'll need more than patched walls and borrowed air," Arg replied. "The belt doesn't forgive standing still. If you don't move forward, if you don't learn to take risks the right way, you'll run out of scraps to live on. And when that day comes, hesitation will kill you faster than a breached hull." Silence fell. The younger children's faces flickered with fear. The older ones tried to mask it with tough expressions, but Arg saw through them. He always did. "That's why we're stepping up," he continued. "Advanced training, mining runs, salvage operations. The things that make life possible out here. You'll do it with me, under watch, until you're ready to do it yourselves." He straightened, letting his hands drop from the table. "You've shown me you can hold together. Now you'll show me how you can work." The first run was simple by belt standards, though Arg knew better than to call it safe. A cluster of shattered rock drifted near the derelict, remnants of a mining blast that had fractured a small asteroid decades ago. Among the debris were packets of frozen volatiles, water ice, ammonia, trace elements, all precious to anyone scrapping survival from the void. He suited the orphans in patched EVA gear, checked every seal himself. They shifted restlessly, the younger ones trembling under the weight of tanks too heavy for their frames, the older ones hiding nerves behind smirks. Arg's own suit was scarred and seasoned, a miner's tool that had seen more years than some of these children had been alive. "We move slow," he instructed as they clustered in the lock. "No drifting off, no showing off. Stay tethered. Listen for orders. And don't forget, the void doesn't care if you're ready. One mistake is all it takes." The lock cycled, the thin hiss of decompression giving way to silence as the outer door yawned open. Blackness stretched before them, speckled with cold stars. The cluster of rocks loomed nearby, jagged silhouettes turning slowly against the distant light of the sun. One by one, the orphans pushed out, lines tethered to the lock. Arg followed last, boots pressing against the edge before he launched into the void. The widow drifted nearby, her sensors keeping a quiet watch over the exercise. But Arg trusted little to machines. His eyes stayed on the children, every movement catalogued, every stumble corrected with a barked word. At first, it was clumsy. Gloves too stiff for delicate adjustments, jets firing too hard, bodies spinning until Arg had to snag them by the tether and steady their panicked breaths. But bit by bit, they found rhythm. He showed them how to latch a rock with clamps, how to test for stability before cutting, how to work in pairs so no one was ever left drifting. By the time they returned, tanks running low and limbs aching, they carried with them chunks of ice sealed in collection bags. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Their first take from the void, pulled by their own hands under Arg's watch. The pride in their eyes was muted by exhaustion, but Arg saw it all the same. Days stretched into weeks. Arg pushed them further each time, wider orbits, heavier cuts, longer hours in suits that pressed too close against skin already rubbed raw by recycled fabric. He taught them to read sensor sweeps, to judge when a rock was worth the fuel it cost to reach it, to tell the difference between promise and trap. They grumbled, they resisted, but they learned. Arg felt the strain in his own bones. Nights where muscles ached and sleep never came, where his mind slipped back to the hub and to Kara. He pictured her in the quarters near the medwing, moving slower now, pausing more often as the weight of 6 months' pregnancy set into her frame. He carried her voice with him across every comms check. Short messages, careful words, the quiet strength she carried even when he could hear the fatigue behind it. "They're growing, Arg, and so am I. Don't forget that part." Her reminders pulled him back from the edge when worry threatened to choke him. The children weren't just training for themselves. They were a reflection of what he would one day pass to his own child. The hard lessons of survival, the stubborn will to endure. Still, he saw the gap. For all their progress, the orphans leaned on him too heavily. They looked for his nod before cutting, his hand before sealing, his voice before moving. Independence was a word they hadn't yet learned to live. And Arg knew time was shorter than they realized. The breaking point came on a salvage run. A derelict hull floated half buried in a drift of ice, the remains of a shuttle that had burned out long ago. Arg sent the orphans in under watch, instructing them to strip wiring, harvest paneling, anything that could be traded or patched into their station. At first, it went well. They moved with practiced rhythm, clumsy but capable. Then one of the older boys, Rin, grew reckless. He tried to cut free a panel wedged deep against a jagged breach, ignoring Arg's warning. The panel gave suddenly, the boy's tether tangled around twisted metal, his suit scraping dangerously close to rupture. The others froze, panic flooding the comms. Arg moved fast, clamping to the hull, cutting the tether free with a precise snap of his blade. He hauled the boy back, suit hissing from a shallow gouge that nearly breached. "You think this is a game?" Arg's voice thundered across the channel, fury and fear barely leashed. "One mistake and you're nothing but ice drifting into the void. Is that what you want?" Silence answered him, broken only by ragged breaths. The lesson had landed harder than words ever could. They finished the salvage in silence, eyes lowered, movements measured. By the time they returned, Arg knew they had felt the weight of what it meant to work the void. That night, alone aboard the Widow, Arg sat in silence, helmet discarded, sweat drying against his neck. He thought of Kara again, her strength, her weariness, the life she carried. He thought of the orphans, their frightened eyes, their dependence on him. He knew he couldn't be everywhere at once, couldn't guard every tether, shield every child from every mistake. The belt didn't allow for that kind of safety. But he could give them enough to stand, enough to last, enough to one day do what he would not always be there to do. In that quiet, heavy moment, Arg realized what advanced training truly meant. It wasn't drills or salvage or mining runs. It was preparing them for the day he wouldn't be there. Just as he prepared himself, every hour of every day, for the child he and Kara would bring into the same unforgiving world. Chapter 22. Leadership Challenges. The Widow's docking clamps released with a low metallic groan, the kind of sound Arg always paid attention to. Metal didn't lie. Either it held, or it didn't. He glanced at the readouts anyway, confirming what his ears already told him. Secure. The orphans were strapped into the small bay, helmets clipped at their sides, crates of salvage wiring and sealed ice blocks stacked between them. Today wasn't about mining, patching, or cutting salvage. Today was about something trickier. Something he knew could undo a hard-won survival effort in a single bad decision. Trade. For weeks, Arg had guided him through the basics of keeping a station breathing and pulling wealth from the rocks. They had learned to cut and to weld, to tether themselves in the void, to pull ice and ore without dying in the process. But survival wasn't only what you scraped from the black. It was what you could hold on to once you had it. In the belt, that meant trade. And trade meant dealing with people. Arg didn't trust people. Not easily. Not after a life of broken promises, betrayals, and factions willing to gut each other over scraps. But these kids didn't have a choice. If they were to last, they would have had to learn to stand across a table and barter without folding or bleeding. The nearest outpost wasn't much. A half-hollowed rock with a docking ring, 3 levels of cobbled-together modules, and a population that waxed and waned with the fortunes of the surrounding belt. But it had merchants. And merchants meant opportunity. And risk. The orphans whispered among themselves as the widow approached the rock. Their voices buzzed with nervous energy, bravado covering unease. Arg listened without comment, arms folded across his chest. He would let them speak, let them plan, let them imagine how clever they were. That was part of the lesson. When the widow clamped into place at the outpost's dock, Arg stood. His shadow fell long across the bay, and the chatter quieted. "You know why we're here," he said, voice steady. "You've got salvage, ice, things worth something. You want to live more than a week? You need more than air and water. You need trade. Today, you lead. You step up. You handle the talking. I'll be there, but I won't carry you." Tessa straightened, her sharp eyes meeting his. She had emerged as something like a leader among them, not because she was the strongest, but because her tongue was quick and her mind sharper than most. The others looked to her whether they admitted to it or not. "What if they try to cheat us?" she asked. "They will," Arg answered flatly. "That's the point. You'll learn where the lies hide, where the pressure comes. You'll learn how much you can bend before you break. And if you can't hold your ground, you'll lose everything you've worked for." That silenced them more than any lecture could have. Arg keyed the hatch. The airlock cycled, the stale scent of the outpost bleeding in, a mix of recycled air, machine oil, and the faint sour tang of too many bodies crammed into too small a space. Go, Arg said. The outpost's main exchange deck was little more than a wide corridor lined with stalls and counters. Merchants hawked spare parts, worn suits, protein packs, and data chips of questionable provenance. Lights flickered overhead, throwing shadows that made every deal feel like it was happening in an alley. The orphans carried their crates forward, awkward but determined. Tessa led, with Rin and a few of the older ones flanking her. The younger kids stayed close, eyes darting from stall to stall with a mix of awe and fear. Arg followed at a distance. He didn't interfere, didn't step in. His presence alone was enough. Broad-shouldered, scarred, kind of a man who carried silence like a weapon. The merchants noticed him, but didn't meet his eyes for long. That was as much protection as he would give. The orphans stopped at a stall run by a thick-set man with his beard gone mostly to gray. His counter was piled with old suit parts, scrubbed and repainted to look newer than they were. His eyes narrowed as he sized up the children and the crates they carried. "Well, now," the man drawled. "What's this? Kids playing miners?" Tessa set her jaw. "We've got salvage, wiring, ice, looking to trade." The man chuckled, a sound without warmth. "Do you now? And what would you know about trade, little one? Ice is common. Wiring's junk unless it's clean." He leaned forward, plucking a coil from the crate and holding it up to the light. Scorched ends. Worth maybe a handful of credits. And ice? Half of it'll melt before you get it sealed right." Rin bristled, stepping forward. "That's a lie. It's good salvage." The merchant's smile widened. "Oh, a feisty one. Tell you what, I'll take it off your hands, all of it, and I'll give you enough ration packs to last 3 days. Generous offer, really." The younger kid stiffened. 3 days sounded like a feast to them. Tessa glanced at Arg instinctively, but he gave no sign, only watching. She turned back to the merchant. "Not enough. Wiring's good for patching. Ice is sealed. You want it, you pay fair." The man's chuckle turned sharp. "And what's fair, eh? You think you know what things are worth? Out here, worth is whatever keeps you alive. And I don't see you lasting long enough to matter." Tessa hesitated. Rin looked like he was ready to throw a punch. The younger kid's eyes darted nervously, some already leaning toward the deal. The cracks were showing. Arg folded his arms tighter, holding himself back. This was their test. The negotiation dragged. Tessa tried to hold her ground, naming higher numbers. The merchant countered with laughter and insults, poking holes in their confidence. Rin nearly lost his temper twice, only held back by Tessa's sharp words. The younger ones whispered among themselves, their fear threatening to split into panic. Finally, Tessa straightened, her voice steadier than before. "If you won't trade fair, we'll find somebody else. Plenty of stalls here." The merchant's smile faltered. He hadn't expected her to walk. "Now, wait a minute." But she had already turned, gesturing to the others. Reluctantly, they followed, hauling the crates back into the flow of the market. Arg allowed the faintest nod. Not perfect, not smooth, but the first lesson had sunk in. You didn't have to take the first hand shoved in your face. At the next stall, they tried again. This merchant was a woman, her eyes sharp, her counters clean. She didn't waste time with mockery. She named a low price, but it wasn't insulting. Tessa bargained, firmer this time, and after some back and forth, they struck a deal that left the kids with ration packs, a spool of clean tubing, and a half-credit chip. It wasn't riches, but it was theirs, and it was earned. Back aboard the Widow, the orphans buzzed with talk, voices overlapping as they recounted every twist of the negotiation. Rin still grumbled that they should have taken the first man's head off. The younger kids clutched their ration packs like treasure. Tessa sat quiet, her face caught between pride and worry. Arg let them talk themselves out before he spoke. "You saw how it goes," he said. "Some will try to cheat you, some will try to scare you. Some will deal fair, but only if you know what you're worth. You can't fight every insult, you can't take every deal. You choose, you walk, you stand." His gaze swept the group, lingering on each face. "You did better than I thought you would, but you've got a long way yet. You lean too heavy on each other, and on me. One day I won't be standing behind you, and you'll have to know when to hold and when to walk away. The day's coming faster than you think." They fell silent at that. Even Rin had no retort. Later, in the quiet of the widow's cabin, Arg keyed the comm. Kara's face flickered into view, pale but steady, her hand resting against the swell of her stomach. 6 months now, moving slower, the fatigue etching into her features, but her eyes still sharp. "They did it," Arg told her. "Not well, not clean, but they did it." Kara smiled faintly. "That's more than most would have managed in their age. You're giving them something no one else has." "Not enough," Arg muttered. "Enough for now," she corrected. "The rest will come. It has to." Her hand shifted across her belly, and Arg's throat tightened. The orphans were one thing, fragile, stubborn, half-grown. But this child, his child. He carried that weight in silence, even as Kara's eyes searched his through the grainy feed. He couldn't promise her safety, not in the belt, not with the seed stirring in fragments back at the hub. But he could give these children enough to stand. And maybe that was the only promise any of them could make. Chapter 23. Mentorship Tests. The station's patched-together mess hall smelled of boiled protein and ozone. Arg sat at the end of a makeshift bench, arms folded, watching the orphans argue. Voices clattered against the bulkheads, overlapping, sharp with pride and bruised with frustration. They had made their first trade. They had walked away with ration packs, tubing, and a half-credit chip, enough to keep the station running for a little while longer. But the story had split into two versions before they even left the outpost's docking ring. The younger kids told it like a victory, recounting every detail with wide-eyed excitement. Their ration packs clutched as if they were relics. The older ones, especially Ren, told it like a failure, grinding out every word about what they should have done, how they could have pressed harder, how they were still seen as weak because Arg had been standing in the background. Tess sat with her elbows on her knees, fingers laced tight, her expression unreadable. She hadn't joined in either celebration or complaint. She just listened, sharp eyes moving from one face to another, weighing. Arg said nothing. Not yet. This was part of the lesson, too. Finally, when their voices began to fade into the dull buzz of exhaustion, he spoke. "You've tasted what it means to deal with others. You saw how quick they'll cut you if you let them. You walked away with something, and that means you didn't fail. But it wasn't clean. It wasn't strong." Rin scowled. "We only got what we did because you were standing there." Arg leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And what did I say before we stepped into the market?" Rin shifted, jaw tight. "That I wouldn't carry you," Arg answered for him. "And I didn't. You handled it. Messy, clumsy. But you did it." He let the silence stretch. The younger kids fidgeted. The older ones kept their eyes down. "Now," Arg said, raising from the bench. "It's time you proved you can do more than trade words. Time you proved you can handle yourself on a mission. Without me." That silenced them completely. You're sending us out alone? Tessa asked, voice steady but cautious. Arg nodded. A simple job. A drift of rock not far from here. Sensors flag traces of ore. Nothing big, nothing unstable. You'll go, you'll cut, you'll haul. I'll watch from the widow, but I won't step in unless I have to. The weight of it landed heavy on the group. Some faces lit with a spark of pride. Others paled. The younger kids looked between each other nervously. You think we're ready? Tessa asked. No, Arg said. But you have to start anyway. The next day, the widow drifted toward the cluster of rock. The orphans strapped into their patched suits, checked seals with nervous fingers. Arg walked the line, inspecting each one in silence, tugging at clamps, testing valves. His presence loomed heavy, but his words were few. When they were all suited, he spoke. You know what to do. Stay tethered. Work in pairs. Don't cut deeper than you can handle. Watch your fuel. Watch each other. You bring back what you can carry, and you bring back everyone breathing. His gaze swept over them, hard and unyielding. If you freeze, if you panic, if you break, the void doesn't forgive. Remember that. They nodded, some eager, some reluctant. Tessa adjusted her helmet. Her jaw set. She looked at him once more, searching for something in his face. He gave her nothing. Go, he said. The lock cycled. One by one, the orphans stepped out into the void, their tethers trailing behind them like thin silver threads. Arg stayed in the widow, seated at the console, eyes fixed on the monitors. Each suit fed him telemetry, oxygen levels, fuel, vitals. He tracked every one. His hands itched to reach for controls, to guide them, to steady them, but he forced himself still. This was their mission. At first, it went smoother than he expected. Tessa led, her voice calm over the comms, directing the others to secure clamps and test the rock before cutting. The older kids followed her lead, working with a rhythm that almost looked practiced. Even the younger ones moved with focus, fumbling but steady. They cut shallow grooves, prying loose chunks of ore. They sealed the first pieces into bags, tethering them back toward the station. Their breaths came fast, their voices clipped, but they were holding together. Arg felt a flicker of pride buried beneath layers of caution. Then Rin decided he knew better. There's a seam here, Rin's voice crackled. Deeper cut. Could pull out a whole slab. Tessa's reply came sharp. Stay shallow. We agreed. One bag at a time. It's solid, Rin snapped. I can handle it. Rin! But the boy was already cutting. Sparks flared in the void as his blade bit deep. Arg's eyes locked onto his suit feed, heart hammering. He forced himself not to move, not to bark an order. The seam gave way faster than Rin expected. A slab of rock cracked loose, heavier than his tether could handle. It jerked him sideways, his jets firing wildly to compensate. His suit alarm shrieked. The comms filled with shouts. Hold him, Tessa yelled. Two others scrambled, snagging Rin's tether and dragging him back. The slab drifted off into the dark, lost. Rin's breaths came ragged and panicked over the channel. Stupid, Tessa snapped, fury shaking her words. You could have killed yourself. You could have killed us. I had it, Run muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Arg's hand hovered over the comm, temptation burning in his chest. He wanted to roar at them, to drag Rin back himself, to seize control. But he didn't. Not yet. The orphans steadied. They regrouped. They cut smaller pieces, slower this time. Every movement tense, but deliberate. By the time they returned to the lock, they carried 3 sealed bags of ore, and every member still breathing. It wasn't a triumph, but it wasn't a disaster either. It was exactly what Arg had expected. Mixed success. Back inside, the helmets came off. Faces shone with sweat, eyes wide, breaths uneven. The younger kids clutched the ore bags like trophies. The older ones said little. Arg stood waiting. "You didn't fail," he said. "You brought something back. You kept each other alive. That matters." His gaze landed on Rin. "But you nearly lost it all because you couldn't hold your ground. You think taking risks make you strong? It doesn't. It makes you dead." Rin flushed, his jaw tight, but he didn't argue. Not this time. Tessa lifted her chin. "We did it," she said, as much to herself as anyone. "You did," Arg agreed. "And next time you'll do better, or you won't come back." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't hopeless. They had seen what they could do. They had also seen how close they had come to failure. Both lessons would linger. That night, Arg sat alone at the widow's cabin, helmet at his side. The comm screen flickered. Kara's face appeared in the soft light. She looked tired, her hand resting against the curve of her stomach. 6 months now, her body slowing, the weight of the child undeniable. "They made it back," Arg told her. "Clumsy, reckless, but they made it back." Kara smiled faintly. "That's more than you expected." "Not enough," Arg muttered. "They're still leaning too hard on me. If I hadn't have been watching," he trailed off, shaking his head. "You were always going to watch," Kara said gently. "But one day you won't be there, and they'll remember this. The fear, the mistakes, the fact that they can still come home. That matters." Her hand shifted across her belly, and Arg felt the weight of it all over again. The orphans, the child, the future pressing down on him like vacuum inside the hull. He couldn't protect them all, not forever, but he could give them enough to stand, enough to carry on when he was gone. And maybe, just maybe, that was all anyone could hope to do. Chapter 24. The Seed. The hub's night cycle always unsettled Kara. The lights dimmed, the corridors emptied, and the machinery hummed in quieter rhythms, as though the entire station had decided to hold its breath. She could never shake the feeling that in these hours the hub felt less like a refuge and more like a hollow shell adrift in the void. She sat in her quarters, her hands pressed to the swell of her belly, feeling the faintest ripple of movement beneath her palm. The child was restless tonight, or perhaps it was her nerves feeding into every twitch of muscle and flutter of life within her. 6 months. The med staff said everything looked fine, though they still worried about stress and exertion. She had pulled back from guild mediation, working more from her quarters, dictating through secure channels. The others accepted it, though not without some whispering. Everyone had an opinion on her, on Arg, on the child. But tonight, it wasn't the child or the politics that set her teeth on edge. It was the fragments. On the low table in front of her, within a sealed containment case, they pulsed. Not visibly, not with light or movement, but with something deeper. A resonance she could feel in her chest, in the pit of her stomach, as if the fragments had woven themselves into her heartbeat. At first, she thought it was only her imagination, but then the instruments began to pick it up. Faint, harmonic spikes on the hub's sensors, subtle shifts in background radiation. The seed fragments were waking. She leaned back, drawing in a long breath, and reached for the comm. Ark's voice came through after a half-second delay, rough with exhaustion. "What is it?" He was still aboard the Widow, docked at the derelict station, nearly a week adrift from the hub. The orphans were asleep in their bunks, the air filled with the faint hum of patched life support. Arg pictured Kara hunched forward, shadows crossing her face, the fragments pulsing somewhere too close. "They're moving," Kara said. A pause. "The kids?" "No, the fragments." That pulled him into silence. She could hear it in the weight between their breaths. "I feel it," Kara continued.
Like they're pushing outward, not enough to break containment, but enough to remind us they're still here. Arg's exhaled rasp across the line.
We knew it was coming.
Yes, Kara whispered, but knowing and feeling are different things. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the hub filled the silence, threaded with the faint echo of her heartbeat against the fragment's rhythm.
Keep them sealed,
Arg said finally. His voice was steady, but beneath it she heard the same unease that twisted in her chest.
Don't touch them. Don't answer. Just wait.
As if we have a choice, Kara murmured. Arg ended the call, but he didn't move from his seat aboard the Widow, his gaze fixed on the derelict station outside the viewport, a broken hulk lit only by the faint glow of patch systems. The orphans slept within its bones, learning, stumbling, growing. But Arg's mind was a week away in the hub. He saw Kara alone in her quarters, hand on her stomach, fragments pulsing only feet away. 6 months. The child would come in 3. But the seed wasn't waiting. The fragments were stirring, and the trial would come before then. Arg knew it in his bones. He clenched his jaw, the weight of it pressing against his chest. He thought of the orphans, of their shaky attempt at independence. He thought of the guild, of the hub, of Kara's growing belly. All of it was fragile. All of it could shatter under the seed's hand. He whispered to the steel around him, though no one could hear.
Not yet. Not now.
But the fragments didn't listen. The next morning, the guild met in their cramped council chamber. Kara had requested the meeting herself, though her body resisted the effort. She sat with her back straight, her hand rested near her stomach, every motion deliberate. Arg wasn't there in person. He appeared on a secured feed, projected against the wall, his image flickering slightly with the half-second lag of distance. He said little as the others filed in. His presence loomed heavy even across the gap. The mediators and quartermasters shifted uneasily, already bracing themselves. They all knew something was wrong. Kara wasted no time. The fragments are reactivating, murmurs rippled. Some leaned forward, others stiffened in their seats. Everyone in this room remembered the first trial, even if they hadn't been inside. The seed wasn't a thing one forgot. They're resonating, Kara continued. Energy pulses, not enough to breach containment, but enough that the hub sensors are picking it up. Arg and I both feel it. And if we feel it, others will soon. A woman from engineering spoke first. Do you want them moved deeper? Hidden? Kara shook her head. No, containment is stable. Moving them risks more than leaving them. What matters is readiness. Arg's voice rumbled low across the feed.
The trial's coming.
The words fell heavy across the room. No one challenged them. No one asked when or how. They all knew such questions had no answers. When the council dissolved into nervous whispers and thin plans, Arg remained on the feed while Kara lingered in the chamber. For a moment, their eyes met across the grainy lens.
You shouldn't be pushing yourself like this,
Arg muttered. Kara's reply carried no hesitation. And you think I should sit in my quarters waiting, pretending it isn't happening?
You're 6 months along, he said.
That child will face the same future we will, Kara interrupted. Her tone was firm, but not unkind. I won't hide from it. The signal cracked faintly between them, distance thickening the weight of silence. Arg leaned closer to his console, as if he could bridge the gap by will alone.
I can't protect both,
he admitted. The words slipped out before he could stop them.
Not the child, not the orphans, not the guild, not against this.
Kara straightened, even through static and delay. Her hand reaching across the table carried its force. You don't have to protect everything. You just have to stand long enough for them to learn how to stand too. Arg stared into the grainy image of her face, finding the same steel he had leaned on since the first trial, the same steel that had carried her through isolation, through fear, through the endless void. He nodded once, wordless. Inside her quarters, the fragments pulsed, a rhythm no one could escape. That night, Kara woke to the soundless pull of energy vibrating through the walls. She sat upright, breath caught in her throat. The fragments called to her, not with words, not with images, but with a pressure that filled her skull and pressed against her chest. She stood, moving to the containment case. The fragments inside gleamed faintly, though no light should have escaped their shell. She reached out, palm hovering above the barrier. The pressure grew stronger, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Behind her, the comm chimed. Arg's voice, low but urgent, carried its half-second lag. "You feel it too?" "Yes," she whispered. "It's louder." "Stay back." She almost laughed, though the sound was thin and brittle. "I don't think distance matters anymore." Arg's silence told her he felt the same. Even a week away, the resonance pressed against him, echoing the tether that had once bound him to the seed. The fragments pulsed through the hub, unseen but undeniable. Systems flickered, lights dimmed, surged, steadied. The engineer swore and scrambled, convinced it was only power fluctuations. But Arg and Kara knew better. The seed was awake again. Chapter 25. Shortness of Time. Arg had grown used to the rhythm of the orphans' station. It was a clumsy rhythm, uneven and stubborn, but it was theirs. The clang of patched bulkheads when the younger ones slammed doors, the chatter spilling through the comm lines during scav runs, the faint buzz of half-repaired wiring straining against the cold of space. It all carried a life the station hadn't known in years. They had come far, he knew. In the beginning, they had been frightened shadows lashing out at anything that came too close. Now they were a crew, a rough crew, half-formed and half-disciplined, but a crew nonetheless. Arg had begun to take a certain pride in that, watching them learn the difference between recklessness and courage, between scavenging and building. He felt almost like watching something grow out of barren stone. But tonight, standing in the widow's forward bay with his helmet still clamped at his side, he felt the first cut of inevitability settle in. The fragments were waking faster now. Each day the pulses from the containment module grew stronger, rattling through the widow's decks and into his bones. He hadn't needed Kara's last transmission to know it. The air seemed to thrum with a resonance he couldn't ignore. The seed was stirring, and he would not be able to carry the orphans into what came next. He leaned against the cold plating, staring at the half-lit corridor where a pair of younger ones, Jarek and Ariel, were arguing over cracked toolkit. Their voices carried sharp edges, but beneath the noise Art could hear something new. Confidence. They weren't afraid of their work anymore. They weren't even afraid of him. They were learning to stand on their own. It should have filled him with satisfaction. Instead, it gnawed at him. He knew what awaited on the horizon, training them to mine safer, to patch holes, to ration oxygen. That was one thing. Dragging them into the storm of the seed was another. The door hissed behind him. Teo stepped in, face smudged with grease. His patched jacket hung loose around his shoulders that had grown stronger these past months. "Filters are holding," he reported, tossing a rag into the bench. "We can push them another week before we need replacements." Art gave a grunt of approval. "Good work." Teo frowned at him. The boy had learned to read Arg's silence too well. "What's wrong?" Arg didn't answer at first. He turned his gaze back towards the dark beyond the bay doors. Stars burned steady there, unbothered by the struggles of orphans and old miners. Somewhere, past those stars, the seed pulsed like a hidden heartbeat. He could almost feel it tugging at him, calling him away. "You ever think about tomorrow?" Arg said finally. Teo snorted. "What's good tomorrow when today's already trying to kill you?" Arg almost smiled. Almost. "Sometimes tomorrow matters more than today." The boy didn't understand. Not yet. He would. Arg feared the day that lesson would come, but not the way Arg had learned it. Kara sat in her quarters near the hub's medical wing, one hand resting on the swell of her belly, the other pressed against the console as though holding the room steady. The guild had been at it for hours again. Arguments over ore distribution, over docking rights, over which stations deserved which supplies. She had mediated as long as she could, but the fatigue had finally dragged her back here. The seed fragments had not given her rest either. The chamber where they were stored pulsed with a glow only she seemed to be able to see. It wasn't just light. It was rhythm, vibration, resonance that threaded itself into her bones. Sometimes it echoed with the fluttering beat of her child. Sometimes it drowned it out. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly. The child shifted inside her, a firm, undeniable movement that left her exhaling in relief. Still alive, still hers. The comm unit flickered. Ark's voice came through, low and rough. "They're getting stronger," he said without preamble. Kara pressed the comm closer. "I know. The guild pretends not to notice, but it's in everything now. Systems flicker when the pulsars rise. People get headaches. I feel it everywhere." Silence stretched between them. Then Ark's voice again, quieter. "I can't bring them into it, Kara. Not the kids." Her throat tightened. She had known he would reach this conclusion. She had dreaded it, but she had known. "You've done what you can," she said softly. "They're alive because of you, stronger because of you. But the trial? It isn't theirs to carry." Kara let the silence linger this time. She had no answer. The fragments would not let her pretend otherwise. Arg found himself walking the station's corridors long after the orphans had gone to their bunks. His boots echoed through the patched metal, a sound too low for a place that once knew silence. He stopped by the old mess, where Kerr had once scrawled half-finished star maps across the bulkhead. They were still there, smeared but visible, dreams of places none of them had ever seen. He laid a hand against the cold wall. "You'll have to chart your own maps," he muttered. "Without me." The words felt heavier than he expected. He thought of Kara then, of her sitting alone in her quarters, hands on her belly, eyes dark with fatigue, but still burning with that fire that had first drawn him to her. He had been apart from her before, during the seed trial, but this was different. Then it had been survival. Now it was choice, duty, and duty meant leaving her alone again when she should not be alone. The fragments pulsed, faint but insistent, echoing through his skull. He clenched his fists. Kara woke in the middle of the night cycle to a soft hum vibrating through the walls. The fragments again. She pulled herself upright, hand braced against the edge of the bunk. Her body felt heavy, slower each day, but her mind was sharper than ever. She could almost hear the fragments whispering now, a language she couldn't understand but recognized all the same. The baby shifted again, and for a heartbeat she thought she could feel two rhythms overlapping, the child's and the seed's, colliding in her chest. Fear clenched her. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered a vow into the silence. "You'll be born free, whatever it takes." The comm light blinked, a message from Arg. She opened it. "Time's running out," his voice said. "I'll finish what I can here, but soon I'll have to leave them." Kara pressed her forehead against the console. Tears pricked her eyes, unbidden. She knew what it meant for him to say those words. He had carried them all. The orphans, the guild, her, the child. He had never known how to let go, but now he had no choice. Neither of them did. The station trembled the next day, not from damage or sabotage, but from resonance. The fragment's pulse surged stronger than ever. Lights flickered across half the decks. Systems faltered, comms distorted. Orphans stumbled from their bunks, wide-eyed, muttering about the ghosts in the walls. Arg steadied them, barking orders, sending repair crews to circuits that weren't broken, teaching them how to act even when the cause wasn't clear. But inside, he knew. It wasn't the station failing. It was the seed pressing closer. He looked at their faces, fearful but trying to be brave, and felt his chest tighten. "You'll make it," he told them, though the words burned like lies. "You'll hold this place together without me." They didn't understand, not yet, but they would. At the hub, Kara stood before the seed chamber. The containment field glowed with sickly light, fragments vibrating in impossible patterns. She reached a hand toward the barrier, not touching, but close enough to feel the hum in her bones. Behind her, a medic shifted uneasily. "It's not safe for you here, Kara." She didn't move. "It's never been safe." Her reflection wavered on the glass. For a moment, she thought she saw not herself, but Arg. Tall, weary, unyielding. Then the image broke apart into shards of light, and all that remained was the pulse. She whispered to the fragments, though she knew they would not answer. "Not yet, please, not yet." But the rhythm only quickened. That night, Arg sat in the widow's command chair, staring at the dark beyond the viewport. His hands rested on the worn controls, but his mind was elsewhere. He imagined Kara sitting in her quarters, fighting exhaustion and fear. He imagined the child within her, small and fragile, waiting to be born. He imagined the fragments pulsing like a second heart between them all. He exhaled, long and slow. The truth was clear now. He could not shield the orphans from the storm. He could not keep Kara from its reach. All he could do was face it, and to do that, he would have to leave the orphans behind. The choice cut deep, but there was no choice. The comm chimed. Kara's voice came through, steady despite the weight he could hear in it. "It's coming, Arg, sooner than we thought." He closed his eyes. "I know." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything they couldn't say. Then Arg opened his eyes and looked at the stars. "When it comes," he said, "I'll be there, but the kids, they won't." Kara didn't argue. She only whispered, "Be ready," and the line went dead. The fragments pulsed again, harder this time, across the belt. Faint signals echoed, distant, haunting, undeniable. Systems stuttered, lights dimmed, comms broke into static. Everywhere, people felt something shift, though most couldn't name it. Arg felt it in his bones. Kara felt it in her blood. The trial was not yet here, but it was close, too close. Arg sat in silence, the weight of decision crushing him. Kara lay awake, one hand on her child, the other on the console where the fragment's pulses could be felt like heartbeat. Both of them knew the truth. The second trial would come before the child. And when it did, everything they had built, the guild, the orphan, their fragile future together, would be tested. The fragments pulsed again, louder, stronger. The stars beyond seemed to flicker. Arg whispered into the dark, "Not ready, but no choice." Kara, far away, whispered the same words. The end of Part 5 of Void Miner, Children of the Belt.